Hey everyone, I've been playing a bunch of Wind Waker HD recently. I've been playing it for the first time actually, and it's got me thinking a lot about how Wind Waker is similar to Breath of the Wild, and also kind of gave me some inspiration for where they should take the Zelda series next. Because I feel like Wind Waker has a lot of cool ideas that are like parts of cool ideas that could make the next Zelda game really fucking cool if they if they like took some inspiration from it. And so I'm gonna be talking about that. I got some notes here, but this is gonna be mostly improvised, so if I stumble over words, don't be too confused. It's just kind of like, I'm just kind of like, like yapping on, okay? So if it gets a little too yappy, you know what's up. But let's start with how Wind Waker is similar to Breath of the Wild, and there's obvious similarities between those two games. The most obvious reference, in Breath of the Wild to Wind Waker or the most obvious, inspiration Breath of the Wild took from Wind Waker are like the Koroks, obviously in the retail. Those both appeared for the first time in Wind Waker, and I'm pretty sure the only time they ever made a return is even in Breath of the Wild, or the Wild era games, as I like to call them, or most people call them. Like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and like the Hyrule Warrior spin-offs and stuff like that. So those are pretty big thing. The Koroks are like a really big part of Breath of the Wild. They're like the main collectible of the game, and the Rito are like one of the major four factions in Breath of the Wild. So that's a pretty big thing, but it's not all. Obviously, there's a lot of other big stuff in Breath of the Wild that is directly taken from Wind Waker, like Beetle, for example. Beetle in Wind Waker is a traveling merchant of sorts who has like a bunch of who runs he calls it a shop ship or a ship shop. I don't remember in which order it was, something like that. And he just has like this small boat. He that appears in around certain islands, or if he just travels around the map with, and you can meet him in his boat shop here and there, and he sells you some stuff. And he works very similar like that in Breath of the Wild, where he has this massive backpack, and you just oftentimes will find him close to stables where he's just hanging out or walking past, and then you can trade with him. Obviously another big one is also Lurelin Village in Breath of the Wild, which is a very obvious callback in reference to Outset Island in Wind Waker, or from Wind Waker. Similar architecture is like a seaside village, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know if I think it's in Tears of the Kingdom, where you can even find the Toon Link tunic, or the Wind Waker tunic, the Hero of Wind's tunic, in chests nearby. So very clear inspiration taken there, or very clear reference even. But those are just references to Wind Waker. They're they have some these are things that I guess kind of just are there as fan service in a way. Look, you remember Wind Waker? Here's these guys again. Cool, right? But there's actual mechanics in this game, major mechanics and parts of the world design that actually mirror Wind Waker in a lot of ways. And this is not necessarily a mechanic, but the art style. The art style is not that different to Wind Waker. Both games kind of have a cartoony art style, and at least for the characters, where it's kind of this cel-shaded look, right? And I'm pretty sure Wind Waker and the Wild Era games are the only two games are the only games in the series that actually have cel-shaded art, which is essentially just again this cartoony look with harsh shadows on the characters, or even environments. And it's just a funny parallel. Could be a coincidence, it could be intentional, I'm not sure. It's most likely just a coincidence. But then you have stuff like the monster outposts in Breath of the Wild, or monster camps, or whatever you want to call them, where there's just a bunch of monsters hanging out, a bunch of bokoblins around a campfire, or in a big skull, on like wooden platforms that very closely mirror the monster platforms from Wind Waker. So in Wind Waker, when you like travel around the Great Sea, you'll oftentimes come across these like platforms coming out of the water with like a pole, and then there's like a little wooden platform on top with like a bokoblin or two hanging out, or sometimes even some other enemies, and then there's like a chest, and that's very similar to what Breath of the Wild has. And in Breath of the Wild, these monster camps are like a big part of the game. So I think it's interesting just how similar they are. There's also stuff like, like the paraglider in Breath of the Wild being pretty similar to the Rorok, sorry, being pretty similar to the Korok leaf from Wind Waker. They have, they're both like gliders essentially, which is interesting, and like they allow for a lot of traversal. There's also, actually this one is probably like my favorite one, but when I first saw this in Wind Waker, I was like, I was going crazy. And it's the fact that enemies can drop their weapons when you hit them. Like, if you stagger an enemy, or you stun them, or you knock them over in Wind Waker, they'll drop their weapon, and sometimes they even, like, when they get back up, they'll scurry to get their weapon back. And I swear I've seen this happen in Wind Waker too. Like, in Wind Waker specifically, I've seen this happen. Enemies will pick up other enemies' weapons, which is, like, even a step further. And that is crazy to me, because that's exactly what's happening in Breath of the Wild. That is like a core mechanic of Breath of the Wild. It's how dynamic the enemies are and how they interact with the world, and that's so cool. I mean, obviously in Breath of the Wild there's like a few more layers on top of that, but like just like the basic idea of enemies being able to like drop their weapons, pick up weapons they're lying around, even other enemies' weapons, and stuff like that is wild to me. Or if they can't find a weapon, they'll like try and fight you like one-on-one combat with their like hands or whatever, which I'm pretty sure might be misremembering, but I think in Wind Waker the Dark Nuts do, for example. They'll like pull out the martial arts when you knock their sword away, and that's really cool. I also got some other parallels between the two games. Some of these are probably more coincidental than anything, but both in Wind Waker and in Breath of the Wild, Link can swim, but he cannot dive, and he has very limited stamina while he's swimming. And I think that's just an interesting coincidence. Again, I don't think this was intentional. It's just, in Wind Waker, they probably just didn't let him dive, for example, because like they would have to model the entire bottom of the ocean, and that's a pretty big undertaking. So like, yeah. And in Breath of the Wild, I mean, they do model a lot of like underwater stuff, but like you're supposed to use the abilities to get like chests out of the water. You're not supposed to just dive down there and open them, so like they want you to use like Ultra Hand in Tears of the Kingdom, or Magnesis in Breath of the Wild, or something akin to that, So that's just like a few like a different design decisions probably that just coincidentally created a very similar, I guess not necessarily mechanic, but like little like quirk of the game. And yeah, what's interesting also about both games is both games have a hand enemy that rises from the ground. And Tears of the Kingdom, not necessarily Breath of the Wild in this case, but Tears of the Kingdom, you have the Gloom Hands, which like rise from the ground. They try to grab you and like damage you, or like they take your hearts away temporarily. And in Wind Waker, you have the Floor Masters, which are similar, except they don't take your hearts away. They just like drop you off at the entrance of the dungeon or room, depending on. I think it can be both. It depends. And that's interesting to me, because like I don't know, they have like a similar mechanic maybe, but like I think they're just like they're visually similar. I think is what I'm trying to get at. And where this gets even more interesting is with Phantom Ganon. Both Wind Waker and Tears of the Kingdom have a Phantom Ganon enemy, which is pretty much just a tease or like a weaker version of the final boss. It's pretty much just supposed to like tease the final boss of the game, give you like a little bit of a taste for how it's gonna be to fight the final boss. and or at least I think that's how it works. That's definitely how it works in Tears of the Kingdom. I don't know if that's how it works in Wind Waker, but I would be surprised if not, because like, well, I don't know, like I feel like that's just kind of, it just kind of makes sense. And the Phantom Ganon design, like obviously in Tears of the Kingdom, Phantom Ganon is like the Gloomhands and Phantom Ganon. They're part of one boss fight, but Phantom Ganon is essentially just the second phase of the Gloomhands. And in Wind Waker, Phantom Ganon is like a separate enemy, but oddly, he very much reminds me of the Floor Masters in that game too, as in they just have like some visual similarities in their design, where they're both like these like ghostly things with with like a black body, but then like a colored outline type of thing. I just think that's interesting. It's kind of like there's probably some theory crafting to be done here, but that's not what we're gonna be doing today. That's for some other day or for someone else to get into. And talking about getting into, I guess. Let's talk about probably the biggest similarity between Breath of the Wild and Wind Waker, or like what really made me go like, damn, these games are not that different. And also Wind Waker has some really good potential if you like change some aspects of it to become like a really good open world, or to expand, or or it could be a good inspiration to expand upon what Breath of the Wild does open world wise. And because Wind Waker, the thing with Wind Waker is Wind Waker essentially becomes an open world game once you finish like the first half of it, or the first third of the game. Like once you finish the trying to think, I think once you finish like the second or third dungeon in Wind Waker, you're pretty much free to explore the entire map, everything, all of it. There's no loading screens, it's all connected. It's in pretty much every sense of the word an open world. Obviously you can't like solve every puzzle yet on like the different islands in the game, because some of them require specific items you have actually still to obtain from like dungeons and whatnot. But like in theory it is an open world and you can go everywhere. And I think that's interesting because like and I mean, like, I guess it kind of is similar to Breath of the Wild, and like, yes, you can go everywhere, and it's just kind of like, like one big interconnected world, which I don't think any other Zelda game really did like that, at least not without like loading screens or like screen transitions. Like, people say Zelda 1 was like a big inspiration for Breath of the Wild, which I'm pretty sure it is. But I don't think anyone has ever mentioned just how similar Wind Waker is to Breath of the Wild. I mean, I talked about this for like the last 10 minutes now, and there's like I feel like I made a good point that like these games are surprisingly similar in many ways, where I feel like Breath of the Wild was probably very heavily inspired by Wind Waker, which is cool. I don't know, I just never heard anyone talk about that, but now I've been playing Wind Waker for the first time myself, and I'm like, damn, like these games are not that different when you think about it. Which brings me kind of to my kind of like the second part of this video, which is, like, if we combine, like, Wind Waker does some things better than Breath of the Wild, and Breath of the Wild does some things maybe more interestingly than Wind Waker when it comes to open world aspect, obviously, because Wind Waker is technically not actually an open world, or I don't think it was supposed to be. It just happens to be like a side effect of like how they like how they made the game, I guess, where you like on a big ocean, just like riding from island to island, instead of being on like Hyrule Field, and you have like Hyrule Castle, or like Hyrule Town, and then Kakariko, and then like the Lost Woods. But now it's like all underwater, and it's just like mountaintops poking through, like, I don't know, like they can't really make like like transitions like that, where like all of a sudden you go through like a gate, and then like there's like a quick loading screen or transition. I don't know, whatever, we're getting off topic. My point is, Wind Waker inspired a bunch of ideas in me for what the next Zelda could look like. And so I want to talk about what I hope even the next Zelda is going to look like, or what I would do if I were in charge of making the next Zelda. Let's say it like that. Here's what I would do if I was in charge of the next Zelda. I think obviously we need a new location for the next Zelda. Let's start small. We need a new map. That could be obviously something else in Hyrule, like not Hyrule at all. So we could go to Termina again or Koholint Island. Although I don't think revisiting those places is gonna be that interesting. I think having a completely new region or kingdom to explore would be cool. I feel like it would be interesting in the world building if Zelda went like, yo, what if there are other kingdoms outside of Hyrule or other societies that like are previously unseen? Because I feel like Zelda has done very little to explore actually like other like regions of the world. Like clearly there's more outside of Hyrule, but like very rarely seen what there actually is. So that would be cool. Or if they don't do that, or they could do it even still, they could make another game that's set in the sky again. A game in the sky would be cool, but also I feel like maybe it might be a little bit too soon for that. Like Tears of the Kingdom is very recent, and so is Skyward Sword. So I don't know if they could add that much interesting to it, or if it would be too repetitive for now. Maybe like 10 years down the line after the next Zelda or something, when people when people are like starting to like yearn for something like that more. Like right now, I think we got enough sky stuff. Even if there's an argument to be made that Tears of the Kingdom doesn't have enough sky stuff, but like, that's just like, it's just like an idea that you could do, or like you could put another element of Skylands in there, because I'm a big fan of Skylands personally. I'm just saying, like, yeah. I think what could be cool would be a Zelda game set underground even. Like what if Hyrule suddenly had to like move into like giant caves, like the depths in Tears of the Kingdom? But obviously it would have to be more detailed than the actual depths if if the full game was underground. You would have to have more biomes and more visual like variety and like landmarks that are like underground and like a giant cave or cave system. It's like, I've been throwing around like a bunch of ideas of like what different overworlds Zelda could do that would even like allow them to reuse Hyrule, right? Where like, oh, like in Wind Waker, Hyrule is flooded. In this game, Hyrule is underground for some reason. I don't know. You can probably write a good story around that. Would be awesome. They made a pretty good story around it in Wind Waker. But like, like obviously this is a video partially about Wind Waker, so obviously I think the coolest thing they could do for the next Zelda game would be if they made another game that's set in like an ocean world, or where there's a big focus on like exploration, like a big focus on like having like a big body of water to just explore. So, but obviously it would be bigger than Wind Waker. So we could have another incarnation of Link that travels by boat or whatever, but this time he doesn't travel around this like ocean with like a bunch of small like islands and like spires that come from the water, right? Which is just like mountaintops. No, this is not like a flooded world type scenario like in Wind Waker. It's more like just like the natural oceans around Hyrule. So what we could have is like different continents in like different corners of the map, right? Like maybe there's like 4 or 5 major continents. In the center there's like one continent that has like Hyrule, and then you have like 4 or 5 other, like they have like 3 or 4 other like kingdoms around Hyrule that you can like travel to, right? And then like maybe there's like also some story like thing going on between these different kingdoms, or whatever, really, or they have like all their own quirks and like citizens. Maybe okay, I didn't even write this down. It's like a thing that genuinely just popped to my head right now. What if like the Hylians have like their own little like island and kingdom in like Hyrule, and then there's like suddenly like a new Goron kingdom. There's suddenly like a whole Sora kingdom, like a major kingdom, not just like a little town, or like Sora's domain. Like I'm talking about like an actual like gigantic like city, or like small villages all around a big city. Like scattered across like a bigger continent, or the Gerudo have like also like multiple cities, and so do the Rito, or maybe they introduce a completely new species of like a completely new race of characters in the world. They do that all the time, so like it would be cool. Um, so that would be nice. But also would maybe elevate this a lot more would be underwater exploration. I mean, imagine like a big water-based map where you can actually just dive down wherever you want, and you can just like find treasure. Maybe there's like hidden puzzles underwater, or even some dungeons, which we will get to dungeons in a bit. But imagine you just like dive down in like some area, and it's like a really deep trench, and at the very bottom there's like a big dungeon entrance to like some forgotten temple, and there's like a quest that leads you there. That'd be so cool, right? Kind of like in Twilight Princess or Ocarina of Time, where like there's like a little dungeon at the bottom of Lake Hylia. That'd be cool, I think. But this time it's like in the actual ocean. There could also be, like I don't know. I'm thinking about like when I talk about underwater exploration, I like kind of visualize Subnautica in my head. Like imagine if you had like maybe you even have like underwater like mining or like resource gathering. Like I don't want this to be like a crafting game, but like I mean like if you like kind of like how it works in like Breath of the Wild, where you just get resources to like upgrade your gear, at like vendors or like shops or like the ferries or whatever the hell, you know. And like you have to, and maybe there's like advanced ways to like move underwater, like items that allow you to swim faster, items that allow you to like maybe like some sort of swimsuit, like the Sora armor, stuff like that. I don't know. I just wanted to bring up Subnautica into this briefly because like I played that last year or fairly recently, and I love that shit so much. It's so good. So yeah, I think a game like that would be a Zelda game that kind of like, like dabbles in something like that would be cool. It doesn't have to be a major part of the game, but I feel like it would be pretty cool if there was like some underwater exploration. And for like how you're gonna like explore the world above water, or above ground. I mean, you can have like a whole shipbuilding system if you wanted to, or you could have a system where Link can upgrade his ship or have different ships, right? Like in Wind Waker, you have like the King of Red Lions that you travel around with, but like maybe in like the next Zelda game, you're gonna have like a small boat when you start out, and you can buy a bigger boat, and you can buy and then we need a bigger boat, and then you can buy an even bigger boat. And and then like you can add like stuff to your boat, like cannons, and maybe it's like pirates and stuff. Like I don't know, man. That's like I'm turning this into Sea of Thieves, and I haven't even played that game yet. But like I don't know, it's just like a bunch of cool ideas with like another water-based Zelda. Like what I'm trying to get at is that like, like there's a lot of ways to make an ocean-centered or an ocean-centric Zelda game. Without like just remaking Wind Waker, like there's a lot of stuff you can use Wind Waker as a basis, and then you just expand on it, or it's like a completely different approach even to like an ocean-based game, like Zelda game, because it's not like there's like flooded world and there's like a few small islands here and there. No, this is like an actual like world with like continents that you can explore with like big bodies of water in between them, And like that's kind of what I would make if I was in charge of the next Zelda, to be honest. I also would probably change up the art style a little bit. I mean, I feel like a new art style for every Zelda game, or for every like whenever there's like a new Zelda era. Like, and it's not like Zelda games like to reuse art styles between like games sometimes, but generally Zelda is known for making every game look unique and usually like completely switching it up every few years. I mean, that's a big appeal of the series to me. I think one of the coolest things about Zelda is never knowing what kind of art style they're gonna go for next. It's just pretty cool. So like, I hope they switch it up, because we've been working with the same art styles for like a decade now. Like Breath of the Wild, like the Wild era art style. It's really nice, but like we need something else. And same with like the clay art style of Link's Awakening Switch and Echoes of Wisdom. It's cute, but like I feel like the series had better art styles, and I hope they come up with something cool. Maybe something more realistic would be cool. Maybe something more like Twilight Princess. They haven't explored more realistic or dark, gritty art styles in a little bit. So if they could do something like that, I would be quite welcoming of it. I even think that a reason they might have not done that for example, Breath of the Wild, might be because the Switch and the Wii U, they were like hardware-wise a generation behind. So they had to kind of like, when they made an open world game, they had to go like, okay, we have to kind of like compromise here, and we have to make it cel shaded, which I think, don't take my word for it. I might be making this up right now, but I think I've heard somewhere that was like part of the reason the game, they chose that art style. But with the Switch 2, they might have like better more graphics processing power or whatever the hell, and maybe they can like go a little bit more detailed, a little bit more like textured. I don't know, just an idea. But let's get to like kind of like my last idea here, which is the gameplay structure, and I'm gonna try and keep this somewhat short because we're already nearing 30 minutes. But I feel like for the structure of the next Zelda game, so obviously it's gonna be an open world game. I mean, like, this is pretty much confirmed. They're gonna keep doing open world games, which I'm totally welcoming of. I love open world games, and like Zelda's my favorite franchise. Dude, like match made in heaven. Breath of the Wild is like amazing, one of my favorite games of all time. But like, I feel like definitely what Breath of the Wild kind of like fumbled are the dungeons and the progression of sorts. Progression in Breath of the Wild is like, it's kind of there, but it's not really like it's not as satisfying as like finding a new dungeon item in, for example, like Ocarina of Time, because like old Zelda games, you find like a hook shot and you're like, holy shit, I can do so much shit with this, right? And Breath of the Wild is like, oh, a weapon is slightly stronger than my previous one, that's pretty neat, and like, like it's like, I feel like they have to kind of like embrace the old like progression again, a little bit at least, where also like obviously they have to bring back dungeons, which kind of gets me to my idea for like the overall like gameplay structure, like the gameplay world. So I think obviously it makes sense. You start out with like a certain set of abilities, kind of like in Breath of the Wild. You get like like 3 or 4 abilities from the start that you can like utilize to solve puzzles on a tutorial area, and then after that on like pretty much in the entire game. But those aren't going to be the only abilities you can get. I want there to be a lot of optional items and abilities you can use in this game. So my idea essentially is, you finish the tutorial, you have like 3 or 4 abilities which are pretty flexible, but you can't do everything with, right? Like maybe you get like bombs, maybe you get like bombs, and then like something like I don't know. We can get to examples later. Maybe I have like one example or something I want to talk about. But essentially, you get like 3 abilities. Let's just say it like that. With these abilities, you can solve a decent amount of. Let's say you can solve about like 50% of the overworld puzzles, or let's say like 30%. But then there's like let's say like it's like the dozen major dungeons, like half a dozen major dungeons scattered throughout the map. The traditional Zelda dungeons, and the way they work is, you get to the dungeon, you can use all the items or the abilities you get from the tutorial of the game to solve the first half of the dungeon, or like a little part of it, and then you get like the dungeon item, and then you have to solve the rest of the dungeon with that dungeon item and defeat the boss. And once you finish the dungeon, you get to keep the dungeon item, and you can leave the dungeon, and then you can use that dungeon item to, for example, explore the overworld again, and like do puzzles that you previously had to skip, or like mark down on your map for later. So let's say you get like bombs in a dungeon. It would work like this, like you go to a dungeon, you have like your very basic abilities. You have like a lantern, you have like a lantern and a boomerang. That's like a starter items. And then like you do like a bunch of like light like torch puzzles. You know, like the classic it's like the classic Zelda puzzle. Like light all the braziers or torches, and then like a door opens or you get an item, like a key to get to the next room. You do a few of those, then you get the bombs. Then the dungeon makes you do a bunch of bomb puzzles. And then the boss is like the Dongo from Ocarina of Time. You throw a bunch of bombs into his like mouth, and you defeat him. And then you're allowed to leave the dungeon again. This is also an idea: you can't leave the dungeon before you complete it with the dungeon item. Once you get it, otherwise you could very easily cheat it, obviously. But once you finish the dungeon, you get to leave the dungeon. You permanently unlock bombs, and now maybe you can like walk around. And maybe previously you found like whatever this game's equivalent of shrines, for example, might be, and then you can like bomb open the entrance to that shrine, and then in there is like even more small bomb puzzles, and then you get to do an extra bomb puzzle, and you unlock like something cool, and like maybe not like a major item, but you get like a new weapon, or you get like, let me think, like a heart container, a heart piece, stamina. Depends on if this game is gonna have something like that, but maybe it will. Depends. Like there's a lot of mechanics that would have to work together to decide what kind of like rewards you get from doing certain stuff. But this is just kind of the basic idea I have. Like essentially you don't start out with every item from the get-go. Instead, you have to unlock most of the items in the game while you play by doing, like major traditional style dungeons, and then you get to unlock like a lot of big locations in the game, or you get to unlock a lot of puzzles that you can do now. It's kind of like, I think this would be a good mix between the traditional Zelda formula and, what we got now. And that's kind of like what I personally yearn for the most. I'm just looking at my notes real quick to see what else I have, so I'm not forgetting anything, because I think that's pretty much like the end of what I was going to get to. Yeah. Oh yeah, one thing I want to add to the dungeons thing is like, you could even make some of the dungeons work in a way where if you get to a specific dungeon and you already completed like 2 or 3 dungeons before and you get the items from those dungeons, you might even be able to take some shortcuts through that dungeon or unlock some secrets in that dungeon, which also kind of like makes the order in which you complete the dungeons more interesting. And maybe even the dungeons, I'm not sure if this would work or if this would be a smart decision, but like the dungeons even give you like the medals in Ocarina of Time that you get after finishing the medallions. I don't know what they call it. Ocarina of Time, and when you have when you complete every dungeon in the game, you get to you unlock like the final boss or the final dungeon, and then you get to like do like a big thing, whatever, you get to fight Ganondorf or whoever the villain would be, and then that would be kind of the idea here. And the way you find the dungeons could even be like, could be tied to different kind of like in Breath of the Wild, where it's like, oh, the Gerudo have a dungeon, and then the Gorons have a dungeon. I mean, that's how most other games do it, right? And then they kind of like give you like, they send you like a little quest to even like find or unlock the dungeon, and then once you do that, that's when you can finally like do the dungeon, and then stuff like that. I think that would be really cool. I don't know. Give me, if anyone's watching this and you're still watching, give me your opinions on this. I think it would be really cool. Maybe some dungeons even can be solved in multiple ways, or they give you a reason to like finish one half of the dungeon first, and then you come back once you have a different item and you finish the second half. Something like that would be really cool. I would probably eat this up like crazy. The more I think about this, the more I love the concept I have. I don't know how much this would work in practice, but I have a good feeling about this, and I feel like if Nintendo does something like this and they pull it off successfully, this would probably just straight up be my favorite game of all time. Like if it's like as big as Breath of the Wild map wise, but it has like like all these like extra elements and like traditional dungeons and like like a little bit of backtracking but not too much, and like just like satisfying puzzles, and like a real sense of progression by finding like major items that unlock like a lot of new puzzles and solutions. That'd be so sick. And like I'm looking forward to the next Zelda. I'm sure they're working on it right now. They probably, maybe they even have an idea that's like infinitely better than what I just told you. Who knows? That's why I like this. Like that's why I like the series, because like you never know what's next, and like they genuinely like good. Like, I have good feelings about Zelda. I feel like the series as a whole is in good hands. Sure, Tears of the Kingdom received a lot of like criticism, and it's probably considered a train wreck by many people. I personally loved it. I can definitely see its like issues, and that's why I hope the next Zelda game is obviously gonna be even better. Despite Tears of the Kingdom already being amazing, despite its shortcomings, So you know, I'm excited. I hope they announce the new Zelda soon, because like I can barely wait. And if it's not what I just told you, maybe I'll just make a game like that myself someday. I don't know. I don't know, man. I'm like getting really excited about this idea. I would love to play something like that. Like it won't even have to be a Zelda game. Maybe there already is something like this. I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, thank you for listening to my yapping. I'm gonna go and quickly edit this, add some gameplay over my shitty voiceover, and then I'm gonna finish Wind Waker, I think. So like, yeah, see you. Have a nice day.